Are you wondering which political party is going to be most likely to fix the economy? I mean, we know at this point that Labour's going to get in, and if all the polls are to be believed, which at this point it's so unanimous in the way that it's looking that we can't really take the polls to be anything other than at least fairly accurate in that it's going to be a Labour landslide. But are we expecting Labour to bring great sweeping changes? I would say that there's a fair amount of people voting Labour that will probably say no to that, but they're still voting Labour because they're simply not the Conservative Party. But personally, for me, I'm not voting Labour. Full disclosure, I think I've made this before in other videos, and it's no great secret. I'm a Green Party member and I'm former Labour, and there's a reason why I'm former, and it's just simply because I don't believe that their policies are the best for the country. And whilst I'm, largely on board with Green Party policies, I don't think that let me just sort of set something straight. I don't think that any one party has the ability to encompass entirely the values and beliefs of people entirely. So I don't think that any one party is going to have, you're not going to tick the boxes for the manifesto in terms of agreement for any political party. Well, the best that we can do is to select one that we think most aligns with our values and the way that we see is best for the country to go forward, and we kind of throw our weight or vote behind that. But the reason why I'm talking about the economy is because as a critical criminologist, and for those of you that don't really understand what the focus of a critical criminologist is, for me it's a large percentage of my research, of my attention goes to, and this links to a video that I posted a couple of weeks ago. It goes to structures of society that are harmful, that are lopsided in that they favour the more powerful, the more wealthy, the elites of society. And because of these lopsided social structures, that lends into social harm. For those of you that have watched that video, you'll probably pick up on and be able to relate back to some of the points that I made. For those of you that haven't watched it, it lightly skirts the topic of what social harm can encompass, but in a nutshell, it is largely vulnerable groups who are at the mercy of the wealthy, those who wield the most power in society, and the mechanisms of society that work to the benefit of those at the top of the hierarchy. But what fuels this? What fuels the motivation to structure societies, our society, British society, American, a lot of Europe, in the way that it is? And for me, that always comes back to the economy. You can gauge the health of a society by simply gauging the health of the economy. Now, this is my researched opinion. An actual economist, again, I need to underline, I am a criminologist. An economist may well feel differently about this, but for me, every other aspect of society, every other institution in society, whether that be healthcare or education, whatever it is at the mercy of the economy and how that is functioning at any given time. So if the economy is, let's say, sick, then the other elements, the other institutions, the mechanisms of society are going to suffer as a result. And that's maybe understandable if, because at times economies, they face sticking points, they face dilemmas as any other part of mass communities will. It's a little harder to take though when the economic ideology that's been thrusted upon us, and here in the United Kingdom, particularly since the 1970s and 80s, since the Thatcher era in particular, when that economic ideology is by default immediately set up to create winners and losers. And a lot of the political parties in this campaign, they aren't doing enough, not for me. After 14 years in particular of the most severe form of neoliberalism, the political parties, the currently and technically the opposition parties, and this includes Labour until at least July 5th, they aren't doing enough to, and this will come down to just they plainly just don't have the motivation or the willpower to do so. They aren't doing anywhere near enough or anything at all to criticise and promise meaningful changes to the economic ideology that got us and has brought us to the place that we are now. None of them are attacking neoliberalism. None of them are attacking the motivation that has seen inequalities over the last 14 to 15 years in the United Kingdom exacerbated tenfold. You just look at any measure of society from 2010 up until 2024, and we've regressed. We have regressed. The numbers are there to be seen, and I'm not going to sit and list statistics off you, but what I came across just a little while ago was, and I'd implore you to go and read what The Guardian has published today, and they are referencing Sir Anthony Seldon, who is a leading academic when it comes to the health of nations. He's a historian, so what he's done is conducted some research to find, or at least part of the findings that have come from his research has been to determine that the last 14 years of Conservative governance has been the worst in British history. Certainly in more recent modern history over maybe the last 150 to 250 years. And there's a lot in this, even just reported from The Guardian. Obviously there would be more in the direct academic texts from Seldon. But it makes for a depressing read. I'll just read to you the first extract, the first paragraph of the extract, or the first extract that The Guardian has provided. And it reads as such: in comparison to earlier the earlier four periods of one-party dominance post-1945, it's hard to see the years since 2010 as anything but disappointing. By 2024, Britain's standing in the world was lower, the union was less strong, the country less equal, the population less well protected, growth more sluggish, with the outlook poor, public services underperforming, and largely unreformed, with respect for the institutions of the British state, including the civil service, the judiciary, the police, and these were all lower as it was for external bodies, including universities and the BBC, repeatedly attacked, not least by government ministers and right-wing commentators. This goes on, and it systematically lists every, or quite a large array of society where we are lesser where we were 10 years ago. And this is because of neoliberalism. This is because of the economic ideology that this current government has exacerbated, but it was brought in by the previous iteration of Conservative government under Thatcher, carried on into Major, and New Labour under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. They carry this on as well. So the Labour Party aren't to be exonerated or forgiven in this either. They privatised a fair share themselves. They just did it in a bit more of maybe a bit of a discreet way. I don't think it was actually that discreet. Actually, it was probably more, you didn't expect it maybe from Labour. Especially if you're, what I might call like a layman, you're not really into politics, you're not really that bothered about the economy, as long as you're doing all right, and you're able to pay your rent and food and everything's sort of, you're doing relatively okay, and that's grand. That's fine. And because of that, though, you probably didn't know, if you lived and if you were a working adult under the new Labour government, you probably didn't realise that they privatised their fair share. And then comes 2010, and the Conservative government, albeit in a coalition for the first 5 years, bring in austerity. So look, neoliberalism, it advocates for free markets, for business and corporations and what have you, unregulated markets as well, so businesses should be able to essentially do what they please and the markets will watch themselves and regulate themselves. And it's a more extensive form of capitalism. And austerity then is neoliberalism on crack, or rather, let's go capitalism is the attainment of commodities and land and wealth. Neoliberalism is capitalism on crack, and austerity is neoliberalism which encompasses capitalism on some form of new synthetic drug. Let's say spice. Let's say it's probably one of the more dirtier drugs today. But either way, it's a more concentrated, more aggressive, more unforgiving form of capitalism, and that is what has been bestowed upon us since 2010. The rollback of state responsibility. Neoliberalism is all about small government. It advocates that if there is less government interference in the markets can flourish that bit more. And public-owned assets, let's say the NHS, the crown jewel of the United Kingdom, public-owned assets create, they deny an element of the market that profit can't be made. So let's say you, today, break your arm. You're going to take yourself you're going to go to the NHS because it's free. Well, I say free, you pay for through your taxes. But you're going to rock up at A&E, well, idealistically, you're going to rock up at A&E, you're not going to have to wait too long. You're going to be seen to, you're going to be, examined, tested, bandaged, sent on your way, and you're going to have checkups thereafter to make sure that you're mending properly, and you're not going to be footed with a massive bill. You're not really going to go out then, because you've got that service, and seek a service that you have to pay for. And this is idealistically, if the health service, we know it isn't, but if the health service was working properly. You're not going to go out then and seek private care because your taxes pay for this wonderful service, and there's no point. There's no point in putting yourself in debt or anything like that. Go to the NHS, get yourself seen to. So because of that, there's no profitability. No real profitability, because what's the point in setting up a private healthcare business in the United Kingdom or in a country that has state-run services that are functional, that they work? It's not a good avenue to go into business. It doesn't make sense. So neoliberalism sees state-funded public assets as a hindrance to profitability and advocates that state-provided security mechanisms for me, you, everybody should be minimal to non-existent, so that private entities can come in, provide at a cost. And that's in essence neoliberalism. So because of that underlying ideology then, the more exacerbated and the more extreme form of that, austerity, in 2010 saw the rollback of government responsibility to us in, I would say, unprecedented form. And without going into the ins and outs of it, because I wrote an entire PhD on focused on this period of our history, particularly when we get to the mid-2010s. But very bluntly, our problems were not caused by the European Union and what have you. It was caused by government, deliberate government, decisions to roll back on state provisions. And because neoliberalism thrives off free markets, it advocates for it, it's the heartbeat of what that ideology is. By then leaving the European Union, we are now faced with ever greater regulations. We are now a third party to our biggest trading partners right next door to us, where once we were at the table making the decisions, now we are subject to the rules looking in from outside. And in a market where, again, things need to be unregulated and the markets look after themselves, Brexit poses a problem to the extent that no government, absolutely none of them, that come in and has to work under the current conditions, i.e. the UK outside of the European Union's free trade agreements, is going to be able to do anything other than probably at best basically work with a stagnated market. So basically the point I'm getting at is that if you are expecting great change from Labour, you're not going to get it, particularly because if you look at their manifesto, it's fringing on, it's kind of Tory-esque from the current Labour Party and new Labour under Blair were centre-right. I mean, they always said that they were centre-left, but they're not. They're centre-right, they're watered-down Tories. And their current manifesto, I mean, it reads, it's kind of like a 2010 Conservative manifesto. I think they're going to bring in austerity measures again, and it's something that they'll probably disguise well, and will probably not see it as being as detrimental as what the Conservatives did, probably because they won't go as hard. But as well, we don't attribute austerity to new Labour governments or just Labour governments. So I don't think we're going to prosper, and I don't see where the wiggle room is, because we unless we change our current economic ideology, for me as a criminologist, all I can see is further social harms. And for me, the social harms are those aggressive rollbacks to state responsibilities. And that includes healthcare, that includes education, the welfare system, if you were to go unemployed, all of it. The rollback to that batch of safety nets that we are all, we can all be benefit to, for me is a criminological consideration, because it's a decision that if these things were explained to us truthfully and clearly by those either elected or seeking to be elected, that's what they were going to do, we'd probably tell them to piss off. So the fact that they are shrouding their true intentions for economic gain, either themselves or, as we've seen plenty of during the last 14 years, to say decisively, friends, cronyism, rife. If they mask their true intentions, for me as a criminologist, that should be a criminological matter. And it falls very much under the bracket of social harm. So the rollback to state provisions has the ability to increase inequality, increase premature death through stress or malnutrition or whatever inequality, that broad bracket of what a person is subjected to if they are on the bottom end of the equality scales. It was only a few weeks ago in one of my classes that I was watching a video put on. Obviously, I'd seen it in a news report the night before. I think it was on Channel 4. In the fifth or sixth biggest economy on the planet we're meant to be, and we have citizens who can't get a dentist appointment, or they cannot afford a dentist appointment, to the point where they are extracting their own teeth. That's where we are at the minute. And for me, that's a social harm. For me, that is, it raises the question, at what point do we consider the lies and the economic decisions and the harm that comes thereafter as a form of criminality? And there's plenty of criminologists, critical criminologists, who would allude to or outright ask the same questions. We've seen, again, poverty, child poverty in particular, grow. We've seen Conservative MPs bask in the glory of being a country, being a government that has been able to provide the most food banks. That was actually put down as a positive at one point or another, believe it or not. I remember it well. Can't remember the Conservative minister, but one of them actually bragged about their ability to be able to provide food banks rather than the prevention of ever needing them to begin with. We could go on. This government's been just despicable, and we know this, which is the reason why in about 2 weeks they're going to be out the door. And again, this brings me back to my initial question. What are we expecting from New Labour? Because I can't get past the barriers that they are inevitably faced with. Right, I think rightfully, and again, look, I won't be voting for them, but I think rightfully they're not head-on talking about Brexit. And Brexit's part of the problem. It's a big part of the problem, but it's part of the problem. If we were a member, we would be seeing much more prosperity. The last 3 or 4 years probably wouldn't have been termed as a cost of living. It would have been reasonably difficult, but I don't think it would have been a cost of living. Wouldn't have reached that kind of a scale. But I can't see Labour being able to get much more out of the current situation. I think the deal that we've got is probably one of the best ones that we've got. Again, an actual economist might feel a little bit differently, but for what I know, I just don't see where the wiggle room's going to come from. I don't think, they are incompetent, our current government, but that said, I don't think a competent government can get anything more out of the European Union being a third party entity. So with that, for now, unless something comes along that changes my mind, with that recognition, what have they got to work with? I'm going to leave this one up to you. This isn't going to be the last time I contemplate this particular topic, but I do want to hear from you, and the comment section is definitely the place for that. Let me know. Maybe I'm missing over something. Maybe I'm shrouded by my critical criminological lens, where I don't see a grander economic argument. Brexiteers, and there's still plenty of you out there in denial about the shit show that that you've helped bring upon the rest of us and yourselves. You're still in denial, but that denial is going to be based on some level of a belief that we are either now or can be better in the future. Tell me where that is, because I can't see it. And I've been asking for, as a lot of people who voted Remain, or people who've come to maybe see the light. We've been asking the questions: where is this prosperity coming from? Or has it been here, or has some elements of it already been here, but we just don't see it? I do want to know, so do absolutely throw your shots my way. Visit the comment section, and I will speak to you again soon.